course, I totally screw up with the mic, but okay, we're here. So thank you for joining me. Today we're going to be going over the altar boy statistics that I said I would review. This is not the video I will be sending to the bishops. There is still some information I need to get, but we're going to be talking about that. So thank you for joining me, and let's get into it. So the statistics I'm using come from what's known as the ordination class, or the survey of ordinands to the priesthood. So this is done in the United States. It is, by the way, this was inspired. I may have said this, I may not have. This was inspired by Brian Holdsworth. I saw his video. I used part of the, his thumbnail to hide part of the stats on my thumbnail to indicate that. And so that's what, so if you haven't seen his video on the altar server situation, in terms of just a mentality, an impetus, a value system, I think he does a great job exploring that. But in this case, we're going to go into the statistics in America, where he did cite Canadian statistics. And so I'm going to follow up with American statistics and then going back 20 years. So that's what we're going to do. All right. So meet the ordination class of 2024. And so it goes into the survey. And the survey, which is right here. Let's see, I'll click it, pop it up, and it walks you through the process, as well as the point of this. This is done by Kara, which is out of Georgetown. You got Father Tom there, and Michael, which we've referenced a few times in other statistics, specifically with the priesthood that's publicly available as well. This was a bit harder to get into, though, as this was, I'll explain in a second, but just to clarify, there were 475 priests that got ordained in 2024. This surveyed 392. And so that's both for religious and for diocesan. And there's about 55 pages of statistics that you could go through if you wanted to. And I'm basically just setting up like what this does. And because what we care about is at the bottom here. I forget which, forgive me. I forgot what page this is supposed to go under, or what page I'm supposed to go to, but it, let's see, Eucharistic order, or all right. So it should be here it is, altar server. So did you serve in any of these parish ministries before entering the seminary? Percentage of all respondents, 2024. And so we see here, the breakdown. It's typically religious, diocesan, and all. And typically religious is significantly smaller than diocesan, and for obvious reason, I think. But, a diocesan is everywhere, whereas religious orders are not necessarily everywhere. Where altar servers seem to be a huge activity in which a lot of priests participate in prior to becoming priests, as is lector and extraordinary minister of Holy Communion. And in this particular instance, catechist, campus, like what's close enough to be catechist, campus youth ministry, and cantor. So we have those that are huge influences. Okay, so that's this year. And there's another piece of information I'd like to point out. So were you encouraged to consider the priesthood by any of these people? So you have priest for religious at 42%, diocesan 68%, and all, so that's just the average between the two, at 63%. And then you have friend, parishioner, and mother. So those are the ones that encouraged. Like I'm emphasizing this because it matters, because of the next statistic I'm going to show you. I hope I'm not going too fast. If I'm going too fast, please let me know in the comment. I'll be able to see it. Let's see. Who discouraged you? And so then you have friend, other family member, mother, father, priest, or other clergy, Although, okay, so this one's at 5% here. There are others that are higher. And so the point that I'm using as this example is to show you that when it comes to the previous statistic, the priest is overwhelmingly, like, if you were to do a subtraction between the parish priest encouraging those looking at the priesthood, and then the parish priest who's discouraging those looking at the priesthood, and then compare it to all others like friend, parishioner, mother, so on, the parish priest ends up having a huge net positive. And so that's the only statistic here I'm going to care about, but I want to present this to you in a more let's just say organized fashion. And so I have that here. So we'll back up for a second. When you scroll down, so you're meeting the deacons who are becoming ordained. Not all of them, that's just some of them. But then you have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the initial one is 6. So you have 6 studies to look into. And then archived reports available upon request. So that's exactly what I did. Is I went to the USCCB and I requested to have all available studies, and they sent it to me. It was great. I was very glad to see it. And so now we have all the studies all the way back to 1999. Let me make this medium. Yeah, whatever. All right. The point is I have all the studies going all the way back to 1999. The thing is that the question is not in all of the studies. Okay. Like, all the studies do not have the question, were you an altar boy? Were you supported by, encouraged, or discouraged by someone? And so those are important things to recognize. So when you see the statistics I'm about to show you, I'd like you to just keep that in mind, because you will see zeros at the beginning of a few of them, and that is the reason why. So, all right. So when we look at altar boys, so not to blow it out of the gate. All right. So when we look at altar boys going all the way back from 2001 to 2004, we have a pretty consistent trend. Okay. So they weren't in the initial question, but we have 61, 55, and then it shoots up to 73%. And then it bounces around between 70 and 80, except for this one. This one shoots down to 67 for some reason. But there's noise, right? There's variance in between each year. But what you're showing, and just like what Brian did in his video, he'd stated 1 year, I believe. And I'm showing a very constant trend of it just being at the top. Just, hey, how you doing? Nice to see you again. But at the top, so you have altar boys being a significant activity for a majority of priests. And again, this survey isn't just a few priests, right? Like, this is like 75% of the priests that are ordained are asked this question. Now, these first 2 years, that could have been sampling error or a combination of problems in terms of the actual expression. I don't know for sure, but I'm saying what I'm giving you as a statistician is an explanation as to why this is very unusual, specifically at the very beginning. And then it clearly settles down for decades. And so the reason why that may happen is, there's a lot. It could also legitimately just be that that's what it was sampled. But we have consecutive years from 2020 or 2003 to 2024, 21 years of consecutive 70 to 80 percent influence of, or I don't want to say influence because that's technically not correct, but of this particular activity being what ordained priests were a part of growing into their Catholicism and ultimately becoming a priest. And the next thing I want to bring up is the priest influence. So the priest influence, same thing, same studies, starting in 2001, starts with 89 and 89, and then it bounces around, but it also bounces around, quite a bit between the, it has a fluctuation, let's just say that. And but for the last, let's see, 2011, it sits around 65 to 70 as an influential factor. And that would make sense, right? Especially if we look at altar boys. Like, I'm sure the altar boys are being told on as a massive percentage that the priests are telling them, hey, like, maybe you should become a priest. Have you ever thought about becoming a priest? Do you pray about becoming a priest? Like, that's a really influential statistic. And these have clearly overlapping attributes, right? Now, on top of that, we have what do you have it? Like, we have the qualitative aspect of this statistic that this is indicating. And so, and what am I saying? So essentially what Brian's video did in explaining the process in which a priest has an altar boy help him during the mass. So that service that's done, which is not needed. It's absolutely not needed. The priest can do the mass without an altar boy. And that by doing so, he is helping, like, in a very similar way, he's helping in service similar to an apprenticeship. And so just like an apprentice would discern being a master, and then finally coming to the point of deciding and being a master, that's very much how altar boys are. It's a trial period, and it's not, you know, there is also help. I mean, there's legitimate help involved, but this is also a trial period, and that's very influential, not only to the mass, but more so to the altar boys themselves, potentially. Okay, I can't say causal because there's a lot of reasons why I can't say causal, and I'm basically just kind of riding that line as a statistician. Hey, Rosie. Nice to meet you. Hope Sam's doing well. But so we have the situation here where a huge percentage, it's pointing in the direction that the priest interaction and the altar boy interaction seems to be highly correlated to those becoming priests. But the problem, like, there's a huge problem with this, and this is all. And this is because this is like endpoint data. We unfortunately do not have a number of altar boys that are currently, at parishes helping out. We don't have standards for altar boys, right? Like, if an altar boy was there for a week, do we count him as an altar boy, or, for the totality of the parish for that year? Or do they have to have so many weeks that they helped for that altar boy to be considered an altar boy on the tally? And then, imagine looking at the spreadsheet of all 176 dioceses with all their different parishes, right? And seeing how many parishes with a certain number of altar boys yielding so many priests over the course of several years, because it's going to have a lagged effect, right? So, like, because an altar boy doesn't immediately become a priest, there's going to be a lagged effect there. We don't have that data. I don't think we'll ever have that data. It's impossible to be, like, that's a crazy amount of data to gather to show this point. And it's an important point, right? Like, altar boys are training to be priests, or potentially, right? Like, that's the qualitative understanding of helping out with the priesthood, is with the mass as an altar boy, is that they're learning to become a priest, and that they're also discerning to become a priest, and that's a really important aspect. But that's, like, to show a causal analysis would take a lot of data and a lot of time from priests that I don't think is practical. So the best thing that we have, and why I've been very careful about saying influence, causes, and all that other stuff, is because the best thing we have is this. If you're a priest, you were an altar boy 7, 8 out of 10. Instinctively, I think most of us would say, okay, like continue to push altar boys, um, to be altar boys. So boys in the parish to be altar boys to help them discern, because even though we're missing that causal link from a statistical perspective, um, like most of us understand that, right? Like we understand apprenticeships. We understand how when you learn something and you're actively involved in something in a very intimate way, such as when altar boys are at the mass, helping effectively like their future version of themselves, potentially, that is a qualitative understanding that we recognize and see in other uh, positions in life. I don't want to say vocations because jobs are not vocations. Like I don't like using the word vocation for a job, but like we see that in a variety of ways, like from a teacher, trade schools, a bunch of them. So that is the great question, right? Like there is nothing there is no study that I've been able to find to reflect that, because I wanted to dot my I's and cross my T's with this. That data doesn't seem to exist. That do altar girls become nuns? But the other problem is that altar girls, like, I'm sorry, not altar girls, nuns, religious sisters are dying, and they have been dying, like, in terms of numbers, ever since 1994, when and previously since 1965, technically, when they were at 180,000. Now we're at about 36,000. The In 1994 is when altar servers was widened to include officially girls, and so there has been no indication that that has helped those becoming religious sisters or nuns. And so, but that's a very good question. Now, I do want to kind of hammer out a few other things because I think they're really important. Because as I showed you with the study, there was lector and extraordinary ministers, and I kind of want to hit those two in right away, because we know historically altar boys and lectors fit into the realm of the minor orders that existed, that actually prepped you to become a priest. And so that's really important to recognize. And that's coincidentally the two uh, activities in which priests say that they were a part of the most: altar boys and lectors. Those are the top two always in all of those studies. Every single one, those are the top two. And then usually it was extraordinary ministers. But I want to talk about extraordinary ministers at the very end. So lectors, you see this very similar. Uh, Also, Excel. So so it sits at around 60%, and then it drops around 50% here. So the thing about lectors, it's very interesting. So like that's another very intimate, active part of the mass, right? You're talking and speaking in mass from the Bible. It's pretty significant. It's the liturgy of the word, really important. Now, what I've noticed, and I don't know, growing up, I've never seen this actually happen. I've never seen an altar boy be a lector at the same time. I don't know if that's possible. I've never looked into that, like from a like order of the mass situation where they're like separation of duties or whatever. Like I've never seen that, but I've never seen or I'm sorry, I've never looked into that, but I have never seen an altar boy go up and be a lector. I don't know if that's just me or whatever, but what I do know is that there are a lot of parishes that at 8th grade cap off altar boys, and I mean and girls, but like altar servers in general. They'll say, "Oh, you're in 8th grade. Um, Time to stop. Like we're gonna allow the other kids to fill these positions, and basically, unfortunately, reinforce the graduation mindset of confirmation in 8th grade. So that's a very unfortunate thing. But like that happens. And it's unfortunate for like a variety of reasons because those years between 9th and 12th grade happen to be those times in which those young men in particular are discerning what to do with their future, right? Like they're talking about college with their parents and their teachers. And now you've just snipped that connection with the priest in a very intimate way where he's helping out with the mass. And you're not going to have those questions during high school from the priest while he's getting dressed or ready for mass. Hey, are you discerning about the priesthood while you're looking at different colleges? Like, are you doing that? That's gone because it's not infantilizing. Wow, it's not infantilizing, but it's keeping altar boys as altar boys, and that's not okay. Like there are plenty of altar boys that go into adulthood, right? Like I've seen, especially this mostly happens at traditional and TLM masses. So traditional Novus Ordos and TLMs, where I'll see adults be altar boys. But I've also seen adults be altar boys at more, let's just, reverent Novus Ordos like my parish. And so I don't want to say it's making a comeback because I don't know about that, but it is kind of silly to cut off altar boys from continuing to serve where they're going to have a very intimate contact with the mass while at the same time discerning their future. Like you're just essentially removing that connection, and it's not a good thing. But I would suspect that a lot of these lectors were altar boys. If I had to guess, because that's what this is, I'm only guessing at this and how this played out, because there's a lot of overlap, right? Like 60%, 50% with 70 to 80%. All right, there has to be some overlap in regards to those that were both lectors and altar boys. How did that play out? That's what I'm trying to get around, or I'm trying to speculate right here. And so if they were cut off at being altar boys, okay, well they then became more confident and spoke in mass. They're now confirmed. They're considered an adult in the church, and so they can do lector. And so depending on what the conditions are for the given priest, because each priest has their own conditions, and so you have this potential altar boy till 8th grade, and then from 9th to 12th you have lectors or beyond, right? Because you could lector as a 25-year-old, 36-year-old, 71-year-old. Lectors, one of those, like the age is hard. And when you look at the distribution of priests, they're not all like 20 somethings. There's quite a bit, there's quite a huge range on who becomes a priest. You don't see anyone in the 70s, but there is, there is quite a range. And so anybody who's interested, I suggest going to that website and just looking at a few of those studies to see that range. So the last one is extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion. And this one was almost always third or fourth. And there's a reason for this, right? There's a reason why extraordinary ministers is not at the top like altar boys, or sorry, my voice is cracking. I don't exactly know why, but so if you're noticing that, I notice it too. So you have altar boys, and then you have lectors. Those are always 1 and 2. It's always 1 and 2. And then you have extraordinary ministers. And the reason why that fluctuates so much, like you see this 65 to 37 fluctuation over this period of time, and it's partially because you have parishes like mine. Like we don't have extraordinary ministers. They just don't exist in our parish because we don't need them. Like we're efficient with how we distribute, with how the priest distributes Holy Communion. And so you have this omission that should not be taken into account. And to force a priest to have extraordinary ministers seems rather weird, given the state of things. Like, that's one, if you want to talk about one of those criticisms on what's happening with the understanding of both the Eucharist and what's happening in Mass, to make it too casual, this is it. There are simply too many extraordinary ministers. Like, that's the criticism, because it's extraordinary, it's not ordinary. And so to expect all masses to have ordinary ministers is kind of a ridiculous statement to say. And so, even though this is influential, or it's not influential, I keep saying that, I'm sorry, but even though this is an activity that exists, that is very high for ordained priests, it is not an activity that is guaranteed. So you end up having something like this. So just to finish off, like, you end up having something like this, where you have this overlap of what's going on. And you see altar boys, and you see the priest influence. I added in the priest influence, but it's always at the top. The altar boys are always at the top. The lectors are always number 2. And then the extraordinary minister is always number 3. And so I ended up removing the extraordinary minister precisely because, in this case, all these are just basic statistics. There's no, like, I'm not doing a correlation metric, besides the fact that these are the raw metrics for correlation at their individual times, because, that's how that works. I haven't set up that, like, altar boys are a correlation factor, or done like a logistic regression on it. But again, that's like really hard and not necessarily appropriate, given the fact that this is all endpoint data. You don't know how many altar boys there were at these times, and you don't know how that influence mattered into the end result. And so, so to answer, explaining like what happened, like, why I'm responding that's why, is because Hayes asked if they're correlated. I mean, they absolutely are correlated, right? Like, for those that have become priests, they have been correlated. But this is not 7 out of 10 altar boys become priests. Like, we know that's not the case. Like, for a variety of reasons. But we do see lectors. Let me blow this up a little. Oops, I went the wrong way. So we know that's not necessarily the case. So I hope this is explaining like what's going on really well, because I'm trying to paint the picture of, even though this is circumstantial data, this shows that this data. So it's not necessarily that it's causal. Again, I can't say it's causal as a professional statistician. I'm not going to overbite my my statement, but that it is silly to think that altar boys don't play an influence for those that end up becoming priests, right? Like, it is silly to think, okay, 80%, like, you have this like 80, 78, 75, 74, 78%, 75. Like, I mean, they're all in the 70s, right? Like, except for that 67, that it's like right here, which correlated directly with the priest influence. That's very interesting. But you have just this huge influence, or I'm sorry, I keep saying influence, but this activity that is clearly something that points to. So this is something that we would say it points to causation. Okay, it isn't causal. It is something where a study should happen to see if it is causal. The problem, as stated earlier, is that you're not going to really be able to find that data, or set up that data without an extraordinary amount of effort. And so it's one of those situations where you're like, okay, well, do we bet the farm on altar boys? Right? Like, that's kind of like where we're at right now. And the reason why I say that is because if you look at the priest projections, it's not good. Like, priest projections are terrible. I don't know how else to say that. Like, they are just horrendously bad. And we are at a point where we are publicly stating, oh, it's completely okay that women, it's not even women, it's girls, right? It's girls can be altar boys. And it's, when you hear statements, when you hear and read statements of priests talking about how they prefer altar girls over altar boys, or there's a preference to them because they listen better, it creates a very serious problem. And among other things, right? Like, because when you read the stipulations for altar boys and altar servers and altar girls, if there are like the stipulation is something like this: if you have 10 positions for altar servers and you have 10 boys and one girl, you're supposed to have all 10 of them be the boys. And it's with the understanding that this is highly influential from the church's standpoint. It's one of the reasons why I kept saying influential, is because from the church's standpoint, she recognizes that it is influential for altar boys to be altar boys, that they are in a position of discernment while they're actively participating in the mass, and some of them will become priests. It will lead to them becoming priests. Not all of them, right? It's not a direct correlation. It's not one for one, but that it is itself influential in at least getting the question asked and then things happening. Now, like, there's a lot here, like, to kind of already point in the direct, like I said, there's a lot here to point in the direction that this is something that should probably get bet, like the farm bet on. Like, you should probably bet the farm that the altar boy position is highly influential, especially when the church herself recognizes it. Now, the problem here is you have situations like this. Do you know how many altar boys? I'm sorry. Let me back up a second. Here's a situation. Or I'm sorry. Here's the situation. A diocese, the bishop, can state that no more altar girls will be allowed. It'll only be altar boys. Okay, the bishop can do that. And do you know how many dioceses have that situation where the diocese is like, or the bishop's like, nope, we're not going to have any altar girls. It's just going to be altar boys. Do you want to know how many dioceses in America have that? There's 176 dioceses. All right, so like, obviously I'm pausing because nobody's responding, so like in chat, so that's fine. But it's one. It is one. So instinctively, I wanted to see, okay, just one. What is it? It's the Diocese of Lincoln. All right, so the Diocese of Lincoln, it has 100,000 people that are Catholics. They don't have altar girls. So the next question is, all right, so how many ordinations are they having? In 2024, they had 5. 100,000 people had 5. Do you want to know how many the Archdiocese of Detroit had in 2024, which has 900,000 people? 5. So from that 1 year, the Diocese of Lincoln had just as many ordinations as one of the biggest dioceses in the country. Okay, so when I found that out, I was like, okay, well, now I got to do what I did with this study, right? And I looked up a few years, and I was like, okay, well, like, I can't look up every single diocese. I can't go through all 176 dioceses in the United States. And so I requested from Kara. I said, hey, Kara, like, it's Father Tom, like, as I referenced earlier. I was like, can I ask for some data, and how much would it be to pull? And he said, in an email, he referenced that it would be $50 to $75 for the poll of just the Diocese of Lincoln. But if I wanted all of the dioceses, then that would be upwards towards $750. And so that's a lot of money. I can't just drop like $750. But what it is it's something like, this is like the frustrating part when it comes to some of these statistics and trying to present this information is, so I just want to point this out. Yeah, that would be great, because I would, and thank you, Hayden, because I would love to get that data and show this. If the Diocese of Lincoln does have such a situation where they have an amazing ordination record since 1994, that compared to the rest of the United States, then they don't have to be first. What it needs to show is that they do well, for consistently well. So here's the thing, though. So I'm kind of like, I'm trying to give you a proper. Oh, I just screwed this up. Oh my gosh, I just screwed this up. Is this it? Yeah. So all right, here we go. So so the diocese, let's see, ordination all stars Catholic, ordination all stars. So this is 1964. It's a blog post from Kara. And this was it's a research blog from the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, Kara, at Georgetown University, edited by Mark M. Gray. Kara is a nonprofit research center that conducts social science studies about the Catholic Church, founded in 1964. Kara has three major dimensions to its mission: to increase the Catholic Church's self-understanding, to serve the applied research needs of the church decision makers, and to advance scholarly research on religion, particularly Catholicism. Follow Kara on Twitter. I support that. Follow Kara on Twitter. Kara is great. So I want to point this out. Kara has presented the results of the 5 top 20 comparisons for ordination years: 1993 to 1995, 1997 to 99, 2000 to 2002, 2003 to 2006, 2007 to 2009, and now 2010 to 2012. This was done in February of 2014. An analysis of the results of all 6 data points indicates that of the 57 dioceses that placed in the top 20 for Catholics per ordained ratio at least once, only the Diocese of Lincoln was in the top 20 all 6 times. Okay, so what does that mean? Like, there are several factors as to why priests become ordained, right? They all have to have a call from God, but that doesn't mean, helping establish a situation in which the men, the boys, properly discern from God, right? Like, you're going to need that time, that space, and that comes in a variety of ways. And so it could be, all right, the family life, it could be the work life, it could be the parish life. There's a whole bunch of influencers that happen here where pointing to God, like God can be pointed to from all of those situations, and there could be proper direction and mentorship that happens to really establish a good prayer life, establish a good spiritual life, right? So I'm not pretending that this is the end all be all. What I'm doing is I'm stacking circumstantial data on one end, where it just keeps showing time and again that altar boys are influential, or at least it seems like more study needs to be done to show that they're influential, and that we should take it seriously to have only altar boys. And so that's what I'm trying to do. It's incredibly hard because you can't just say, like I've been saying, The statistics say they're influential because we don't have statistics that can do that. We cannot show causality in these studies. But it's, again, circumstantial data. The statistics in how you would expect causal relationships to appear, that's how they're appearing. And the church herself recognizes, as the minor order that it was, that altar boys were influential in boys becoming priests. So I don't even have to go the route of necessarily saying statistically this is the case. So what am I trying to do here? What I'm trying to do here is basically show that I am showing circumstantially that the direction is very strong in one direction, that we should have altar boys, that, like, I would go so far as to recommend, when it comes to bishops, and I say this with humility, that the question of to the priests, do you have an altar boy in your parish that helps you? And if the answer is no, that, like, why? Like, the priest should give you a reason as to why there is no altar boy. Because that is, like, in terms of the sacramental lifeblood of the church, like, that is absolutely needed. And the data points in that direction. Now, I haven't shown you, like, this is basically a part 1 video, because I don't want to make this, like, super long. Because there are ways I will show that when you introduce a girl into a boy's space, that it discourages boys from coming in there. And you know what's crazy? So I'm looking up these studies. Like, I'm looking up these studies to show that, to find that. The problem is that, like, you know how, like, there's this there's this push, like you may have heard of it, where women are saying they can do anything a man can do, and a man is saying they can do whatever, a woman can do. Maybe you've heard of that on some level. Well, turns out this, like, because of that assumption, there are a lot of studies that don't exist today that are modern, and using a study from, like, 20 years ago is something that's not good. Like, you shouldn't be doing that. And so, because of that assumption within the places that get grants and show the influence of boys and girls in their interactions, and the assumption, again, the assumption that, equity is how it's supposed to be, of interaction, and that boys don't tend to necessarily do boy things, and that's bad if they do. That's, like, a real problem in the study space. And so, again, I just want to emphasize, I have a master's in statistics. I know what I'm talking about. Like, when it comes to this stuff, this isn't just me armchairing it. Okay. Like, I'm not an armchair statistician. I'm very much a professional statistician, in my work and what I do in my personal life outside of this. And so I'm trying to help utilize my skills to help the church. And so, I'm kind of stuck in this position, with the Lincoln data, but at the same time, there are other ways of showing that. So, if I'm not able to raise money to get the studies from ideally 1994 to today, which would cost around $750, then I'm going to find another way to do a comparison. As well as I have a comparison. There are practical comparisons I can use where you don't necessarily need a study to understand the dynamic of what's going on, with, let's just say, other organizations, that touch on a similar scope as altar boys. Now, has there been an influence from the abuse crisis? Absolutely. I think you'd be silly not to say that there's some influence there. But, like my archdiocese, we do virtues training. We do, trains the parents what to look for when it comes to a variety of issues, not just priests, but other parishioners. So there's been a lot of preventative protocols put in place, and I think there has been, for a lot of people, reestablished trust, at least on the local level. Obviously, when you hear like Rupnik situations, like nobody likes that. Like, like that's nobody likes that at all, and it is scandalous. But so sorry, I'm just trying to stay on track because this is like really important. Um, sorry, that's the thing about live streams. Like I'm trying to do a live stream while at the same time giving you a very technical explanation. But if you have any questions, especially from down under, because I noticed you in the chat several times, I'd love to have them. It's just, this is like part one. There's going to be a part two, and then I'm going to have a finalized video where I go into explaining for the bishops. It's going to be a recorded video. It's not going to be live stream, and it's going to basically show a very not causal, but as tight as possible that I can make this. Because right now we're in a situation where we need priests, and I think most people would recognize that. My video with John, responding to people saying we're not really in a priest crisis when you take into account those that go to mass. No, we are. Like, we absolutely are. And that's actually, if you want to make, if you're going to use, it's kind of like using, like stating like the problem is somehow not the, like, part of the reason why we have a dwindling weekly mass percentage is because we don't have enough priests to cater, like I say cater, but to attend to the flock. Like, we just don't have enough. And we have priests that are in charge of, like, 1, 2, and I've heard at least once of a priest in charge of 3 parishes. That is ridiculous. Like, that makes for a lot of work for that priest. And I also in that video showed you the burnout ratio, or at least, if you want to go and look at it, the burnout ratios for those priests, which it's not great. But yeah, if you are feeling generous and you want to help with this, especially with the bill of the crowdfunding situation here, that would be greatly appreciated. I don't have any donations outside of donating through YouTube. I don't have Patreon, but any of those donations that I get for this, from specifically from this video, will be going towards research like that. Because at the end of the day, what I want to do is I want to make all of this palatable. I want to bring this to the average person. I will be making videos that are shorter, like I used to, where it was just kind of like when I talked about the priest crisis, it was a 16-minute video and I just went through the stats. I will be doing that. But I did want to establish, I wanted to establish here that I am making headway. There are real studies, there are real statistics that point to a causal link between altar boys and the influence of altar boys and priest and the priesthood. Not that it shows a causal link, but points to, like, there should be another study, and that is something I would like to present to the bishops in a fairly neat package, as well as use use that poll. So that poll would be like from the last 30 years, basically, for ordinations across all the United States Latin Rite diocese. I would use that poll for other things, such as, let's look at the bottom 5 ordinations, the bottom 5 dioceses by ordinations. Like, most people don't know that. And, as we see here, we have There are 16 dioceses, so 2010 to 2012. And another 16 dioceses with almost 1.7 million Catholics had only one new priest. Like, that's like twice as much as what's in the Archdiocese of Detroit, and they only had one priest come. Like that's a serious problem. And these statistics should be recognized and shown, and not just for the bishops. Because at the end of the day, like, if you don't know what's going on, if you're only going, oh, the priest says that there's a priest crisis, but you have absolutely zero magnitude as to what that means, like, that's not helpful. That's not a helpful thing. And so, yeah. All right. So that's it. I don't want to just keep saying the same thing over and over again, but yeah, thank you for watching. And like I said, if you are so inclined to help with these data polls, which is what they're called, donate through this video, and I will put that money towards those data polls. And if you have any questions, you can attach questions. Like, I think you can, I think it's technically like a super thanks. I've only had like, I think one. Yeah, I've only had one super thanks. If you do a super thanks, you could ask a question. You have a comment. If you want a specific statistic, like question, if you want to look up, if you want a particular thing looked up, go ahead and put it in there, and I'll have a whole video dedicated to bring up those questions and showing which ones I can do and which ones I can't. So only because some people will ask questions and either they're too specific or they're too broad, but it's mostly to get a back and forth to understand what's being asked, so that I'm able then to get what you're asking for, or at least as close as possible. I do this all the time during my in my professional job. You have to have a few back and forths, because when you have ad hoc requests from people who are not statisticians, they tend to ask questions that are either way too specific, where it's like impossible to find that information, or way too broad, where you can get the information, but it's not going to help anybody. So, yeah, that's what that's going to be for. So, oh, yeah, no problem. And, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later in part 2.